Winsor and Newton Cotman watercolors are known for being affordable, but can they actually perform? I've had two Winsor and Newton Cotman sets for years, and I've used them for everything from landscapes to portraits. And here is my honest review. So, what are the first impressions? First, you have this really sturdy plastic case that feels pretty durable. After opening, you have, of course, your paint set, but you also have these little paint mixing trays that you can use, although to be honest, I don't really use mine since I use a separate palette, but it is there if you want it. And you also have this little container for your brushes. So, since you have everything in one place, you can just bring this whole set with you and just bring water and you're ready to paint. And while I do really like the case, it is a little bit finicky. The first time I tried to open it, I just tried to pull straight up and it does not like that. So what I've learned to do is to press in on the bottom panel and then pull the case open. So if you do end up buying these and struggle to open them, just know you're not alone. And one more thing to note is that there is room between the pans, which can sometimes cause them to rattle around a little bit in the container, but this is actually by design. This allows you to take out pans and replace them as needed, or you can put in your own colors so you can have a very specific palette. Regardless of what size you get, the packaging makes it super easy to take with you on the go, which is perfect if you're a student or a hobbyist. Speaking of which, who is this set for? The Winsor and Newton Cotman watercolor line is branded for students, but don't let that deter you. Doesn't mean elementary school students experimenting with art for the first time. That means art school students, which makes it perfect for hobbyist watercolors or adults looking to get into watercolors. I would say these are the Honda Civic of watercolors. They're consistent, affordable, and a pretty decent quality. For urban sketching or travel, this little set can't be beat. It's small, easy to use, and has every color you need for mixing. The Winsor and Newton Cotman line comes in a variety of sets, so you can really choose what's best for you. There's even pre-packaged sets with thoughtful color combinations if you're doing landscapes or florals or portraits, and this makes it super accessible if you're a newer artist, so you don't have to worry about all the possible choices. You'll be fine no matter what you pick. Now for the next question you might have. Tubes or pans? The sets that I have are half pans and full pans, but watercolor also comes in tubes. Personally, I quite like the pans since it doesn't feel like I'm wasting any material, but you can get the same effect if you have tubes and squeeze them into containers and let them dry out. Tubes are also preferred if you need to make a lot of paint, if you're working with really large washes or paintings. And although it may not feel like it, tubes are technically a little bit more economical. I would recommend experimenting with both pans and tubes to see which one you like. And don't feel like you necessarily need to shell out for the largest watercolor set out there. Just because watercolor is so easily mixable, you do not need every single color known to man. This here is a set of 14, and this is 24, and I don't think I've ever once thought that I needed more colors since I can mix literally everything I could ever want. So, how does the Winsor and Newton Cotman line actually perform? But hold up. First, we need to mention paper. I actually have a video all about watercolor paper if you want to check that out. But TLDR is that you should be using 100% cotton paper for best results. In this video, I'm going to be using 100% cotton, 140 pound Arch cold press. One of the technical performance aspects of watercolor paints is how easy they are to re-wet. I've had these paints for over 4 years, so you can definitely see how much use I've gotten out of these and how dry and cracked some of these colors like burnt umber and Payne's gray are. But they're still super easy to work with and re-wet with either a brush or a little spray bottle before you paint. I've really had no issues with these paints performance in terms of being able to grab it straight from the pan and put it on a paper, or grab the color from the paints and put it into a palette as well. It really performs very admirably and has zero issues. One of the key differences people mention with the professional line to the Cotman line is the vibrancy. For me, when I'm painting with this Cotman line, I feel like a single layer can almost get me where I want to go, but if you want to keep adding glazes, it really has no issue and it really brings out a beautiful, strong, vibrant color. Even comparing to the professional colors, there are only really small differences. The one caveat being, if you truly want the strongest, darkest darks, I would recommend the professional line for that since they do have a higher pigment density. Lifting refers to how easily the pigment of a color can be taken out of the paper after you already laid it down. And now this is usually done with a wet, clean brush. And some colors, they lift much easier than others. For example, the intense blue and the red colors, they tend to be very staining and tough to get out of the paper. But overall, the Cotman line is very friendly to beginners since it is pretty easy to lift colors out of the paper if you made a mistake or you want to lighten up your shade just a little bit. Ultramarine, raw umber, cerulean blue hue, and some of the other earthy tones are very granulating, meaning it leaves kind of a fun, unpredictable texture on your paper. Now, that's something to watch out for if you're looking at very flat blue wash, for example, if you're painting a very bright sky on a clear day. On the other hand, if you're looking for a lot of granulation, Winsor and Newton actually has a specific granulating line that really emphasizes that effect. In terms of mixing, I've really had no issues mixing any of the colors. I know in some of the budget brands, they can sometimes turn chalky or kind of muddy when you're mixing the colors, but these really work beautifully together when you're mixing them on the palette or even when you're mixing the colors straight on the page. One of the things the Cotman line is really known for is their consistency. In general, the paint looks pretty similar in the pan as it does on the paper, but this isn't always the case. For example, the yellows and the oranges and some of the reds, they look pretty identical in the pan to what they're actually going to be like on the paper. But something to watch out for are the blues. For example, this purple lake and the intense blue, they are quite different on the paper than they are when they are here dry in the pan. So I would definitely recommend doing a swatch test. Or if you really want to go above and beyond, I would do a full mixing chart. So combining all the colors in your palette to see every single possibility you can make with your palette. Now you might be wondering how the Cotman line compares to the actual professional series. The Cotman line actually has slightly less colors to choose from, which might not be a bad thing if you're a new artist who doesn't know exactly what they're looking for. It kind of helps your decision making in that way. The other big difference is that the Cotman line is a little bit less light fast, meaning it'll fade a little bit quicker in the sun, but I still think it's rated for like 50 to 100 years. It kind of varies depending on the color, but it's not a huge difference compared to the professional line. Cotman line also has slightly less pigment in its colors, so it might not be just as vibrant as the professionals. But this doesn't even apply to every single color. I'd say this is a little bit more noticeable for the blues, as you can see here, but otherwise, I would say the performance and the colors are actually remarkably similar between both lines. Here, I'll show you a little test of the comparison between the Payne's Grays of the Cotman and the professional series. The tones are just a little bit different. I'd say the Payne's Gray in the Cotman line has a little bit more blue-green to it, which is something to note if that's what you're looking for. But the Payne's Gray of the professional line is a little bit more dense, so you can get darker shadows with less paint. Now, as you keep painting, you might be asking yourself, will you outgrow this Cotman set? For me personally, I've had this for over 4 years and I really don't feel the need to upgrade, at least quite yet. I feel like I can get every single color I need from this set, as well as the great vibrancy, the density, and the professional look without necessarily splurging for the higher end, especially as I'm still learning and progressing in my art journey. I would also highly recommend these sets for sketchbook work or if you're looking for urban sketching or travel, as they are really compact and really great value for the money. I think you'll only really feel the limitations of the set if you want super dark deep shadows, more pigment load, or you're looking for really heavy granulation in your work. Circling back to the main question. Are the Winsor and Newton Cotman watercolors a good value? For me, I would say the answer to that question is a resounding yes. These have been an everyday workhorse in my art supplies kit, and I have really enjoyed using them. If you're interested in trying them out, I have a link in the description. You really can't go wrong. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.